Hello and welcome to this presentation, the CCIV Corporate Director. And this is the person responsible for Australia's new investment vehicle, the Corporate Collective Investment Vehicle. And that's what CCIV stands for. Now, first of all, every CCIV must have a corporate director. And they only have one director, that corporate director, and there is no position for like an alternate director as you have in other entities. And this corporate director must be a public company. Now, the corporate director, which is the entity that's on the board of the CCIV, they must hold an Australian Financial Services Licence, an AFSL, but not just any AFSL. It has to be one that authorises them to operate the business and conduct the affairs of the CCIV. And so, in general, you could say the corporate director is responsible for the conduct of the CCIV. However, they're able to delegate their powers or the implementation of this to an investment manager who they get reports from and they manage, but the corporate director still maintains the responsibility. Now, the CCIV is not allowed to have any employees, and it's obligated to effectively operate the business of the CCIV. Now, this corporate director must also carry out the functions conferred on it by the Constitution of the CCIV and the Act to ensure that the CCIV complies with its Constitution. Now, a single AFSL may cover the corporate director operating the business and conducting the affairs of more than one CCIV. So it means that corporate director can be on multiple CCIVs. And the CCIV corporate director may apply to register subsequent sub-funds, because when you register a CCIV, you always register it with one sub-fund, but then subsequently they can add more on if their clients so deserve. So for a retail CCIV, at least half, that's for a retail one, half of the individual directors of the corporate director must be external directors. And to be a corporate director of a retail CCIV requires proof of adequate financial resources, and the parameters are detailed in the Act. So that corporate director or the one that holds the AFSL license is going to be a far more substantial type of AFSL holder if they're going to deal with retail. Now, the Corporations Act includes general directors' duties, such as the duty to act honestly and in members' best interests. It also includes CCIV specific director duties, which apply to retail and wholesale CCIVs separately. Now, natural person officers of a CCIV corporate director may, in circumstances, be authorised to carry out activities like entering into contracts on behalf of the CCIV. The employees and officers of the corporate director, so those are the people that are on the board of the corporate director, that is the corporate director that is the director of the CCIV. They have an obligation to the corporate director in their capacity as the officers and employees of that particular public company. And so like any material or personal interests in relation to the affairs of the CCIV held by directors of the corporate director must be disclosed to the other directors of the corporate director. Now, if there is a conflict of interest between the interests of the sub-fund members as a whole and the directors of the corporate director must prioritise the members' interest, which is sensible, of course. Now, a corporate director, as an officer of the company, must take all reasonable steps that a person would be expected to take to ensure that the corporate director complies with the Act. In addition, a corporate director must take all reasonable steps that a person would take to adhere to the conditions detailed in the corporate director's Australian Financial Services Licence, the CCIV's Constitution, and the CCIV's Compliance Plan. A document is acknowledged as being signed if the document is signed by two directors of the corporate director of the CCIV, and or a company director and a director of the corporate director of the CCIV is also an acceptable method. Now, the consequences of a CCIV contravening a civil penalty provision or a Commonwealth criminal offence doesn't apply to the CCIV because they're a corporate entity. They are under the Corporations Act. The duty and obligations of a CCIV corporate directors align more closely with those of a responsible entity than those of a director of another company type. One important duty of the corporate director is to ensure that the assets are clearly identified, valued, distributed appropriately, and they also need to make sure they are held separately in sub-funds. And lastly, a corporate director must engage a compliance plan auditor. So there you go. That's a good overview of the corporate director. If you want more details of CCIVs, go to raiseworth.com. We also have their CCIV creation package. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks.